Welcome to the Princeton Festival Podcast, where we take you behind the scenes of New Jersey's premier performing arts festival.
For my eyes, a man that I despise has turned into a man I like.
With directors, producers, artists, and supporters, we explore the creative process and the challenges of making music today. Join us on this musical adventure. My name is Eva Kastner-Puschel. I'm the host of this show. In our first episode, I'm speaking with founder and artistic and executive director of the Princeton Festival, Richard Tang Yuk. Welcome to our show, Richard.
Thank you. I'm happy to speak with you.
And we're very happy to have you. So today I would like to talk about the Princeton Festival and how it all started. As the founder of the Princeton Festival, please tell us about your initial idea, the first season, some 16 years ago, and how the festival got to where it is today.
Well, that's a very interesting question. And first of all, what I would say is that I'm not the only founder of the festival. It was really the founding board of trustees. And the way this happened, our listeners may know that there was an organization that preceded us called the Opera Festival of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I was on the music staff of the Opera Festival of New Jersey for 10 years. And I got to know several of the board members over that time. At that time, we were performing mostly at the Kirby Arts Center at the Lawrenceville School, and then later we moved to the MacArthur Theater in Princeton. And the Opera Festival in New Jersey went out of business in the fall of 2003. It was a very sad moment for us because those of us who were working with that company, we were so invested emotionally in it. Mm-hmm. And following that, a couple of those board members called me and invited me to lunch. We started a conversation about what would it take to start a new company. And instead of starting another opera company, why don't we start something like a multi-genre performing arts festival? So, instead of just doing opera, maybe we could do musical theater, chamber music, concerts, possibly a piano competition, and things like that, dance, and with a vision for adding various genres as we went ahead. That started about a year of discussions about the new company. Mm-hmm. And we discussed, among other things, what we were going to call it. We discussed funding, who would be on our board. And it took us about, I would say 9 months to incorporate as a nonprofit 501c3 mm-hmm. corporation. We did that in the fall of 2004. And the first season was in 2005.
It's so lovely to hear how it all started. What did you put on the program?
In that first season, we only had 2 events. We had a production of Stephen Sondheim's Sweeney Todd mm-hmm. and a concert of chamber music. And we were very bold. We called ourselves a festival with only 2 different types of events. We knew where we wanted to go, and we had the vision. And fortunately, over time, as finances allowed, we were able to expand the festival in the last 16 years to where we are today with some 22 performances in 8 or 9 genres.
That is fantastic. Now, you mentioned that it took you 9 months, which is not that long for such a big festival. How did you find the name, the Princeton Festival, in the end?
Well, that was a subject of a lot of debate. I suggested that the name had to be simple, short, that people would remember. There was a lot of discussion about should we put the word music into the festival, should we put the word performing arts into the name. And what I suggested at the time when we were discussing this over many months was that let's look ahead much further into the future than just this year or next year or the year after. We may want at some point to include visual art. We may want to include literary arts like poetry. And in fact, we have included poetry readings since then. And so I didn't want the title to be too limiting.
Now, you mentioned you started out with 2 performances only. Let's take a behind the scenes look. What does it take to plan a season?
I start thinking about programming for a season quite a long time ahead. So here we are now in March of 2020, but I started thinking about the 2021 season in November of 2019. There are lots of considerations to think about. I mean, it's not as simple as saying, let me suggest this opera or this musical. Let's just take, for example, one area of one show, costuming for the musical. Before I propose a musical, I have to consider, well, are the rights available? So I have to reach out to the licensing agent to see, is this musical available for production in 2021 in our area? I have to think about, is there a costume package available for rental? I have to think about how many costumes are needed for this production. So that means going through the libretto, scene by scene, to consider, okay, this character has this number of costumes, this character has this number of costumes, because all of that affects the cost projection with the number of staff we need for fittings and for dressers for the actual performances. If there are quick changes that are needed, that has to be factored into the cost. So there's a lot of detailed planning behind the scenes, even before I make a proposal.
I'm also very curious about the timeline. When do you start rehearsing? When do you start engaging all the artists?
Okay, so first about rehearsals, it depends on the project that we're doing. So some things, like this season we have this Latin band Fleur Seul performing with us. That's just a matter of engaging them for the date. They would come on the afternoon, do a sound check a few hours before, and perform on the same day, and then they leave.
But what about something more complicated like the opera? Can you tell me about the audition process, the selection of the artists, and the rehearsal process?
We start auditions in the fall prior to that June. And we would do auditions in New York to cast the principal roles. The opera itself would not start rehearsing until sometime in late May. Usually it's about 3 to 4 weeks before the production, depending on how complicated that particular choice of opera is. And, you know, another component of scheduling the festival is because we have so many events and events that take place in different venues, we have to look at where we're plotting different performances, making sure that no performance is going to conflict with another performance that we're doing at the same time in another location.
Of course. Yeah, and you also mentioned that you start auditioning the opera chorus fairly early, or the Baroque chorus as well. So I'm sure this question that I'm going to ask may be of a great interest to our artists and potential future ones. How do you pick the artists for the opera, the musical, and so forth? Would you tell us about this, or is this a secret that you'd rather not reveal?
It is not a secret at all. So it's a little bit different for each event. It depends on the nature of the event and what we're looking for. So with the opera, for the principal artists, we work with a number of artists, managers in New York, a few in London, in Europe, Canada, in Toronto, and sometimes in California. And we send out an audition notice for the opera sometime in the late summer, usually towards the end of August. And we announce auditions in the fall, starting, let's say, late September, early October. And these artist managers would send us artists from their roster whom they think would be suitable for these roles. And we set these auditions by appointment, and we hear them in New York. Mm-hmm. Now, with the musical, it's a little bit different. So we work both with artist managers for the musical, but also we just make a public announcement on some online site that we know musical theater artists look at. And what I can say is that for this year's musical, which is Sondheim's Into the Woods, it was very popular, and we heard about over 600 artists
Wow.
for roles in the musical alone
How,
in February.
how many days did it take you to audition all of the 600?
So we spent a week in New York. I think the first round, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, working all day for about 6 to 6.5 hours a day. We heard all these 600 and some artists, and then we selected about 40 to 50 of them for a callback session on the Saturday of that week. And at the callback session, what we asked the musical artists to do is to prepare what we call sides in the industry. And a side is both an excerpt from the libretto that we asked them to prepare because we want to hear how they read, and a little excerpt from the actual score itself. And sometimes we have artists in the musical read together if we're trying to gauge, the chemistry between two people who have to play a scene together. And from that, we're able to make our decisions about which artists we would like to hire in those roles. And sometimes, it depends on something as simple as this character is this tall, and this character has to be shorter. It's a visual aspect from the director's point of view. It has nothing to do with singing or the acting. Sometimes it has to do with matching voices. If we have this tenor and the soprano that have to sing together regularly in the show, we want to make sure that those voices match each other, both in terms of the size of the voice and the timbre of the voice. So there are a lot of considerations that go into casting.
Thank you so much for giving us this insight. I think a lot of artists will appreciate your honesty here, and it is very encouraging, actually. Now, let's move on. You revealed already a little bit about the coming season. So it's the festival's 16th season, and it offers a great lineup of 9 different shows, 22 performances total. So besides the opera La Traviata and the musical Into the Woods, what else is there on the menu?
So the festival opens on June 7th with the Concordia Chamber Players, who are a group that's based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And they've been with the festival actually since the inceptions. They were the chamber music group that played with us that very first season in 2005. And they've been a staple on the festival lineup ever since. And that organization is run by artistic director Michel Jokic. So that's on the season. We have a very interesting event that we've created specifically for the festival. It's an interdisciplinary arts event that's taking place at the barn at Updike Farmstead in Princeton. It's called A Mirror Over Time. And it's a work that we've created specifically for the aesthetic of the space. And it will involve a group of singers, instrumentalists, dancers, actors, who are going to create this dream world, performing a collection of poetry and art songs and chamber music that is sort of centered around the poetry of Emily Dickinson.
Now, what about your Baroque series?
Yeah, the Baroque series started several years ago, and I'm happy to say that, it's grown every year, and our Baroque players come from all over, not only nationally, but internationally. And we hand select these players and singers for the Baroque series. And there are 3 concerts in the Baroque series. There's the Baroque Chamber Ensemble, which is basically Baroque chamber music with the principal players of the ensemble. Then there's the full orchestra that does a concert by itself. And then there's the Baroque orchestra with our Baroque choir, rounding out the series. So we have a series of 3 concerts that all happen within the space of 1 week, which means there's not much time to prepare for them. And the Baroque ensemble performers are only here in residence for a period of about a week. The chamber music players are here a few days before that to prepare for the first concert.
And I also heard that there will be some dancing involved this year. We want to get our patrons onto the dance floor.
Yeah, Yeah, so this is about our Latin band, and we were very fortunate to get this wonderful Latin band called Fleur Seul. They're based in New York, and they will be performing an evening of Latin music. They'll be playing many styles of Latin music, including salsa, mambo, cha-cha, and so on. And prior to the performance, there's going to be some dance instruction for ticket holders, where we have a couple of instructors who will be teaching dance steps for those who are interested in it. But dancing, of course, will take place while the entire band is performing during the performance.
And I have to say, I cannot wait to join them. I'm certainly looking forward to the season, which brings me to a different topic that seems unavoidable these days. How is the festival operating in times of a global crisis like this?
That's a very good question, and of course it's on all of our minds. And we have actually set up a task force at the Princeton Festival to look at this situation and to monitor it weekly. So, of course, every arts organization and every organization is going through these issues right now. So all we can say at this point is that we are monitoring the situation, but we still hope to have our season move ahead in June as planned. And at some point, if something changes, we would let our audience know.
That's fantastic. It's more important than ever that we all stick together as a community in these very difficult times and support each other. Let's continue our positive thoughts here. What is your favorite thing you have ever performed?
I get asked that question a lot. And usually it comes in the form of, who's your favorite composer? And, I think for many musicians, it's very difficult to say, this is my favorite composer or this is my favorite piece. I think for many of us, we are so involved and loving what we're doing in the moment, whatever that happens to be. I think one of the most exquisite things that has ever been written is the Matthäus Passion by Johann Sebastian Bach, the St. Matthew Passion. It's something on my list for the Princeton Festival. We haven't done it at the festival as yet, but I think it's such a profound work. And of course, a story that everybody's very familiar with about Christ's last days on earth and his persecution. But when I listen to that music, it's hard to believe that a human being conceived of this. And I think it's one of our, what we call decibel recordings. If we could only take a few things with us, that would certainly be one of the works. But I enjoy many, many things. And of course, we perform many operas, musicals, and other concerts that I've enjoyed tremendously. Another aspect of it, thinking about the opera, the enjoyment of the opera has a lot to do with the personnel that are involved. So, the cast, the creative team, the stage management, and the dynamic that's in the room. So I remember many years ago when we were doing Puccini's La Bohème, that cast got along so well. And even though La Bohème is sort of a sad story, we enjoyed this experience so much because the whole social dynamic in the room was so wonderful. So that's another part of it, and who you're working with on a particular project.
I completely understand. So probably it's not fair of me to ask what your favorite project was, or if you have any.
Yeah, it's hard to choose one favorite. There have been many highlights. I can't say that one thing is my favorite, but I was very proud of the work we did on A Midsummer Night's Dream of Britain. I think the design of that production was really fabulous. I was also very proud of what we did last season with Nixon in China. The planning for that started about 2 years in advance. And even though we had many, many production meetings to discuss the design of the production, it still exceeded my expectations because the projection designer was so creative. And even as we were in dress rehearsals, he was still tweaking the projections, and I would be standing there in the pit in rehearsal and looking at what was going on stage and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Yeah, every production brings certain values and different things that we appreciate. So it's not only the design, it's also the cast, the singers, the orchestra, how we work together, and the music itself, of course.
Yes, certainly. So, is there anything else you would like to tell our audience that we have not yet discussed?
Well, what never comes up in these interviews is, what do you do in your spare time?
Yes.
But
is there a spare time?
There's not much spare time, but maybe some of our audience might like to know that I'm an avid amateur cook, and I watch cooking channels frequently. I watch videos on YouTube a lot about cooking. I love cooking. It takes my mind off of other things. I'm still learning. I'm much better at it now. But it's nice to know that, for example, my sisters fight over me. Come stay with me because I want you to cook for me. It's something I do in my spare time, and I love doing it, and I'm becoming better and better. Some of our listeners may know that one of the items we offer in our silent auction at our annual gala is dinner cooked by the artistic director. But I told a couple of our board members, whom I know very well, because they're such fabulous cooks, I said, you are not eligible to sign up for this item because I'm not going to cook for you.
That is funny. Now, I also could not but hear that there's lots of birds in your background. Would you like to share with us where you are currently?
Yeah, so I'm sorry about the birds interrupting. So I'm currently in Trinidad in the Caribbean. This is where I grew up. And I've been here since March 1st. I came here to adjudicate the Trinidad and Tobago Music Festival, which is a big national festival that involves over 1,000 people in multiple genres, everything from recorder solo, voice vocal solo, vocal music, instrumental music, chamber music, orchestral music, piano classes, and so on and so forth. And so I'm sitting here in my sister's terrace, and there are all these birds because, it's a tropical climate, so there are birds singing all the time. So it's a wonderful environment. Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
It is, and maybe the festival put on some messiaen and birds in the future. Now, to round out our program, I'm giving you some rapid fire questions here. Haydn or Scarlatti?
Haydn.
Violin or viola?
That's a harder choice. I like the viola because of the range and the timbre of it.
Now, record player or smartphone?
Smartphone.
Bebop or cool jazz?
I would say cool jazz for me.
Milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Dark chocolate, most definitely. It's much better.
Interesting. Fast food or 7-course menu?
Well, being an avid amateur cook, I would say 7-course menu.
And last but not least, mountain or beach?
Most people would probably think I would say beach, but I don't really like sitting in the sun. I like being out in sunny days, but I like being close to the ocean. So that's a hard one. I love mountains as well, but I really do love being near to the ocean.
That's wonderful. And you certainly have to come to Austria for the mountains one day.
Yes, definitely.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. Richard, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with me today, and thanks to all of you who tuned in. Be sure to visit our website at www.princetonfestival.org to learn more about upcoming events, as well as ways on how to support the festival. Please join us again next time for another exciting episode in our series. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.